Welcome to another episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Torre Bonanno. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you taking the time coming on my show. I know that you have, you're basically what they would call as mob royalty. If you didn't, you might not have known that.
No, I like it. I like it though. I'm going to use that. Yeah. No one has ever said that to me, but so that you got me.
So do you want to tell me what it was like growing up and what was it like?
Well,
your earliest memories and did you know that your family was different?
No, you don't. When you're a kid, that's your normal, right? You go, you have your cousins, people come over. There's always a lot of people. There's always a lot going on. There's parties, there's confirmations, there's baptisms, there's weddings, there's funerals. So how do you know that it's different? That's your life, right? You don't know it's different when you're growing up. It's not till you start, till I got to high school and really in college when, I would tell stories to people about, some story from childhood and they're like, wow, really? That's extraordinary. So that's when I started to realize really in college, really, when it's like, oh, well, maybe there's something to this that's different, So, no, to answer your question, we didn't know it as kids. We didn't know special, extraordinary at all.
Did people treat you different when they found out who you were and who your family was?
Oh, yeah. Just when you got to college and started telling stories and then the whole time in college was pretty extraordinary and didn't realize that time was extraordinary until afterwards either. So, because it all seemed normal to me.
Yeah. So. Looking back, was there signs?
Well, yeah. When you're, dad and mom take off when you're a junior in high school and your sister's a sophomore and they go on the lam. They went down to Mexico and they were on the run. And, it's not that we were on our own because we had, my grandmother, my cousins, my aunts, had an older brother, who was away at college and another one that was home, but he was a 19-year-old guy in the teenager in the 70s living the life. So but my sister and I, we went to school, we did work, we had jobs because we had to put gas in the car and we had to eat and we made it happen. It wasn't when I say they took off, but there were people around that were guiding, making sure we were staying in line.
What year was that?
That would have been the late 70s.
Because I know early 80s. 1968, I believe the house got bombed, right? And
and that was my grandfather's house in Tucson. We grew up in San Jose, California, and the story is that after the wars in '68, my dad said to my mom, "Where do you want to go?" And she ran her finger across a map. It was back then we had these big maps of the United States, and the furthest point she can get from Brooklyn was San Jose, California. And he says, oh, yeah, we got some relatives out there because Del Monte was out there and Campbell's Soup. And we actually moved to the city called Campbell, California. And that's, right outside of San Jose and Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley.
So who are some of the characters you met growing up as a young kid that you didn't really know who these people were until later?
Well, I was born in 63. So from 63 to 68, when we lived, in Long Island, that was, there was a war going on. There was a lot of guys there. And, we called everybody uncle, or Mr., it was knew that first name to adult stuff, so, they were, all the guys that, Uncle Carl, Uncle Hank, I don't mean to this day, ever knew their, last names. Well, that's not totally true. I learned them later, but that was Uncle Carl. That was Uncle Hank. That was Uncle Frank. It wasn't until much later in life that I found out, oh, they were involved. they just, when they were around, they just seemed like it was part of what was going on. And it was normal.
Do you remember the bombing? Or
No,
were
I
you
was
too
in
young?
Tucson. I didn't live there at the time. And
Yeah.
I wasn't at the house. That was my grandparents' house in Tucson.
Did you hear things like growing up? Did you hear things about that bombing?
I was 5 years old at the time. You hear about it, and there was a commotion and everybody's running around, but whatever, as long as I get my snack at 2:00, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, I was a little bit young in '68 to really,
What was your
distinguish that from
relationship?
anything else. There was so much going on all the time. That was just another one.
Yeah. What was your relationship like with your father?
My relationship as a father as a kid was rough because, when I was born, he was in the middle of the Bonanno Wars, as they're known. And then, he went away for, several years. So, I was, visited him in prison, and, so we had kind of an arm's length relationship. And then there was some resentment there too. It's like, going to things, father, son, events with your neighbor, or, with an uncle, or, my older brother instead of my dad. Right. So, but then as you get older, the old people get smarter as the kids get older. And we had a real good relationship, basically from the 80s. He was in San Quentin, and I lived in the Bay Area. So, we visited him a lot. And that's, when we started to patch up our relationship then. And by the time he passed away in 2008, we were pretty close. In fact, he was coming over to my house to watch the Rose Bowl, the January 1st. And when I got the call that, I thought he was calling to tell me what time he was going to get here, to my house, because I live in Phoenix. He lives in Tucson. It's about a 2-hour drive. But it was, a fire parent. Well, it was my mother, but she was, frantic. And the fireman took over the phone and said, "Hey, your dad just had a massive coronary. You better get down here." And I took off and made it there in time for them to be giving him his last rites in the hospital. So.
Sorry for your loss, man. I lost my father. So when you were in college, how did people treat you? Were they standoffish? Did they treat you with respect because of your name? And
Well, I went to school. I started school at San Diego State, and in San Diego, it's the name is not as recognized as it was in the Bay Area, or as it wasn't. It is in Arizona, was or is in Arizona. However, at one point, when my dad, they arrested my dad in Rosarito Beach, which is very close to San Diego, and I was there, and it was on the cover of the paper, and my face was there. Back then everybody got a newspaper, right? And with the above the fold picture was my face with my grandfather and father. So fortunately, the caption said it was my brother Joe. But people who knew me,
they said it was your brother.
It did. Yeah, it was just missed. Somebody got the name wrong.
There's a picture of your father and your grandfather, right?
That is. My grandfather's on the right and dad's on the left.
So wow, your father, your grandfather, true legend. Like they still carry his name, your name, to this day in the crime family. One of the questions I have for you is, how do you feel about that? That they carry your name in a crime family?
Well, I'd feel a lot better if I got royalties.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something, if there was some, and if there was some benefit to me, there's not. But what do I think about that? It's kind of impressive that it has lasted. And it is, just one of the, the five foundational names of, the American Mafia. And now that, it's all romanticized, and people are, they blend the, what really happened with what's, they see in the movies. It really doesn't, matter. If somebody asks, who's your favorite gangster, they might say Tony Montana, and he's like, he's not even Italian, and that's not even a mafia thing, but whatever.
Or they'll say someone in a movie or something. Yeah,
right. That's what I mean. It's like not even a real character, and so to me, that the name Bonanno crime family doesn't hurt in any way, but because it's recognizable, and people always say, "Hey, are you any relation?" Well, in fact, I am. And usually it's, anybody under 50 didn't know about it. Just a couple of years ago,